So let me know if you have any issues, but the help desk is usually able to work with getting a lockdown browser situated if you encounter problems, okay? So self-quizzing, really good idea. And then the other idea is this idea of studying in spaced out sessions. So that idea of repetitive studying that I mentioned, where you have some time over, from one day to the next, your brain will do some forgetting. So then when you hit it again the next day, it's actually a little bit of effort to recall. And that's actually a good thing. It helps you learn more deeply and make stronger neural connections. And so studying every day or close to that, short bursts of focused studying is a really good way to get the neural pathways solidified and get things into your long-term memory. Study guide for the exam. I don't really do study guides per se. I can create an outline of make sure that you're paying attention to these ideas, and I can post that in EduCat. So, and then of course, the PowerPoint slides are, so when you're studying, that reminds me, when you are studying, I can't remember if I said this yet in this class, the bulk amount of content for the exam is coming from the PowerPoint slides. The textbook readings kind of back up everything going on in the PowerPoint slides that we cover in lecture. And so you will see some questions coming from the textbook, but not, it's really most of what you read in the textbook I cover in lecture. So the bulk of the points are coming from PowerPoint. Yeah. So I'm going to need some questions. I don't use questions. I make them very much. And so I do that during my first exam. So I write my exam questions. And then that reminds me too, okay, so I'm one person, you're many. So the way I phrase something, if it's confusing to on exam day, I'm not trying to make it tricky. So if your brain just isn't clicking with how I phrase the question, then raise your hand. Probably within the first 45 minutes I'll be there so that I can. It's a full 2 hour lab. So we don't design. But you want to relax and take some breath. I don't know that. I'm doing 2 exams right now. My other classes. So really study the PowerPoint slides. That's the bulk of the points. Okay, that's your top study. And then, like was noted here in my notes section in the PowerPoint, make sure you access the notes section. I have extra things typed. And I put them in notes because I don't want the slides too busy. I want you to listen to me what happens because that's really, really important. That's a really good way to learn is for you to listen. If you try to write everything down and listen to me, it's not, you won't hear me. You just hear wah, 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 wah. So please don't be scribbling too ferociously. You need to sit and listen as well. Okay. All right. Let's get into plant growth. So we have been talking about turgor movements, plant growth movements. Let's go into this one. I think we left off here with the dark side and how when you have unidirectional light coming from one side and hitting the plant body in the direction, you can see with very careful research, they actually labeled the auxin hormone blue so that it was very easy to visualize in this very young seedling. And then in this case, the light was coming from the right seedling. And you can see how the lit side of the stem is not seeing much auxin. I don't see any blue there. But the dark side is getting the auxin. So what's happening is the plant is sensing that unidirectional light. We'll talk about how they sense light later. Then the response is, okay, I have unidirectional light. Let's say it's coming this way. I have unidirectional light coming at me this way. So I want to maximize my leaf exposure to sun, right? You want to tilt your leaves to the sun. So in order to do that, they do a growth movement where they send auxin down the dark side and say, grow, 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 grow. That causes this asymmetrical growth of the stem that causes the bending so that the leaves can be pretty much about 90 degrees. So they're doing it to get better oxygen. So if they're just growing straight up, say it's tiny, and they're like, oh, okay, or the sun right above them, oxygen is, of course, down both sides. Good question. So this shift, oxygen shifts to the dark side, and that stimulates growth on the dark side. So do you have like I do, because I have like being one goal, so I will in my I have a lot of answers. And so I wrote it. And then one of the videos that are posted, you can see where they shine light on one side of the seedlings, and they sped up the videography, so you see the plants dash over to face that sun, and then they put the sun on the next day for the light on the other side of the plant, and then that way. So watch that video. It's hilarious to see how the plant is reacting very, very well. Both. Very good question. Because cell growth can mean cell division, but it can also mean getting bigger. And in this case, longer, and they notice both. And then, you know, if you take and shine the light on the other side, it will start to bend. So it's not like it's permanently bent this way. It will keep sensing where's the light coming from throughout its life and respond appropriately. And so, it's a good strategy in the sense of, you know, I like that they captured the leaves in this photo because it's really what they're trying to do is maximize the sun leaves. That's really the goal. And so if the light starts to come from a different direction, they're going to reorient so that they can get their leaves. Most plants like to have, so if it's high noon, most plants like to have lights pretty horizontal so that the light striking the leaf is 90 degrees. That's for physics, that's the maximal angle that really allows for maximal absorption of the light energy. So plants will try to do that, orient their bodies so their leaves are approximately 90 degrees to the incoming light. Okay, so what about what's happening to the ground? Think about roots. In soil, they don't deal with sunlight, but they have to still respond and sense what's going on around them so they know how to grow their roots, into what direction should they grow. And so gravitropism is that idea where in with roots anyways, it's a very positive response to gravity. So we call it positive gravitropism because they want to grow in the direction of gravity. Stems, on the other hand, do negative gravitropism. They want to go away from the force of gravity. So this has been debated heavily in the botany realm for many, many years. And the current hypothesis is that in the root cells, the parenchyma cells that make up the bulk of the root, so there are amyloplasts. You've learned about those in lab. And amyloplasts, they store what kind of carbohydrate? So starch. And so these are just amyloplasts that are in root tissue. Roots love to store up starch. And so roots tend to have quite a bit of amyloplasts, especially like all the deciduous trees right now that are sleeping over winter. Their root tissue is jam-packed, hopefully, with a lot of amyloplasts. So that's these dark little blobs that you're seeing in the image. And as you can see, this root is straight down. And you can see the amyloplasts are settling at the bottom of the cell, so to speak. You see how they've settled. They're not just evenly dispersed within the cells. they've set. And so what they're saying in the hypothesis, those amyloplasts are pressing on that portion of the cell membrane, and that pressure is telling the entire plant, oh, gravity is down. And so they think it's the amyloplast sinking toward gravity, pressing on the cell membrane, and they can pick up on that. So if you think about that idea, no matter which way the root is underground, you're going to have a shift in how those amyloplasts are settled in the cell and pressing against different parts of the cell membrane. So let me jump ahead. Well, yeah, let me go to this one. Hang on. So this one is also showing how auxin, indolacetic acid, indolacetic acid, and it is also helping deal with options of its growth response to gravity. Now it's a little weird because auxins, when they impact the gut, kind of the opposite of what's happening. That's how they. So what the plant physiologists have found is auxin will give direction to the root, but it is in high quantities. So what you're seeing here is, okay, let me explain this. So here you have this, let's go to the top image. The root's straight down. And you can see what they're showing is indolacetic acid comes down the root tissue, and then they've actually documented that it comes down the root, goes to the tip, and then flows back up on either side. So they kind of call it the fountain effect. And so that's what you're seeing. The arrows are tracking the movement of auxin. And you can see that the arrows moving back up are the same width. So they're trying to say that it's all even Steven. Auxin down, hits the root tip, flows back up evenly if the root is straight down. Now you're seeing in figure B, the root is placed horizontal to the ground. So what's happening here, you can see the amyloplasts, these little orange balls. Can you see my cursor or my thing? So those little orange balls, you can see how they've settled on that portion of the cell membrane in those cells. So what happens is indolacetic acid, as it flows back up the root, you can see how this arrow is thicker. This bottom arrow is thicker, and this top arrow is thinner. So what they're trying to show here is that there's actually a higher concentration of auxin moving up the root over on this side, the lower side. The upper side is getting much less. But it's weird. That causes that really low concentration of auxin on the upper side actually stimulates root growth. So I just told you the opposite with stem. Stem tissue, I said, auxin flows down the dark side, you get good growth. Now I'm saying auxin is very little, very low concentrations, and yet it stimulates root growth. So this is an excellent example of just because a hormone works one way in the shoot and leaves doesn't mean it's going to work the same way in the roots. Okay? And so think about it. If you are a plant, you live a very different life. You have your upper, your shoot and leaves above ground. That is such a different world of experience compared to your roots buried in the soil. And so we don't have anything close to that when we live our lives in our environments. So this is a weird example, or it's an example showing how auxin can exert at high concentration stimulate shoot growth, but at high concentration, that lower portion, that high concentration there, it's actually slowing down the very low concentration in the upper portion of the root is actually saying speed up, speed up, speed up, because then that will cause the root. If these cells are speeding up, these cells are slowing down, it causes the root to bend down toward gravity. They think in this case it's planned with a bottom, yes. So it can be fairly efficient because it's like those internal tunnels. So again, you still have this uneven amount of auxin on either side of the root, but it's causing kind of the opposite effect of its concentration. Actually, high concentration, the root slows it. High concentration of auxin in the shoot speeds up growth. So that, can you imagine being a plant physiologist trying to figure all that out? Very confusing at first. And so, but now this is a well-known phenomenon with this hormone, that it can have different effects if you're thinking about root versus shoot. Okay. So let's think about some other ideas of how plants are moving. Here is thigmotropism. So all these links, I tested them the other day. They're all work. So please put those into your browser and watch the short little video clips. They're really fun. So thigmotropism is, thigmo means touch. Okay, tropism is growth response. So growth response to touch. And so here we're looking at this idea of, if you've ever grown peas in your garden, pea plants, you know, they have that tendril that seeks out support so that they can wind around it and kind of keep, that's a way for them to keep their shoots and leaves upright against gravity and get access to sun. So here what you're seeing is this idea of a tendril coiling around some nearby other plant stems, or maybe you have a plant stake in your garden. And so this has been studied pretty well. And again, what they're seeing is an asymmetrical growth pattern where one side of the tendril speeds up, another side slows down. And so what's happening is, if you think about a plant tendril, I don't know, you probably can't see this very well, sorry. But here's the, my pen is like the plant stake. And if my finger is the tendril of the pea plant, if it, the part of the tendril that touches the stake, that's the thigmo. It's making contact, physical contact. And then what happens is those cells start to slow down their growth. The outer cells start to speed up so that it can start just wrapping and coiling. And so again, they have to sense where the stake is. And so that part of the tendril will latch on, keep that physical contact, and then go, okay, here's a stake, want this, so let's coil around it. So then the outer cells start to speed up, and that causes that ability of the tendril to coil and wrap around the plant stake or a nearby stem or something. And so this happens really quickly. Like when the plant makes physical contact with something around it, very quickly it will kick into a bunch of a shift in gene expression, and it'll start growing really rapidly, because they want to, especially coiling binding plants, that's really good idea to have a support like that they can wrap around. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think this is a little bit like it's in overdrive. You know, it's like spastic. And so I know some plants do that, and I don't know if that's like a signal cascade through the whole tendril, and so the whole tendril starts to like, oh, okay, I'll coil. You know, I don't have a firm answer, but that's my guess is what's happening. And so if you've grown peas or beans that vine around, sometimes those vining plants, the way they can latch on and things around them, that's caused a lot of problems over the years. When students pick kidney bean plant peas and they have them together on row legs, and then they start coiling around each other. It's like, you know, eventually you got to separate them, and they can get quite challenging. So thigmotropism. Thigmo means touch, and it turns out the more that they look at plants, the more they realize there's a ton of touch through the whole plant. The plant is exquisitely sensitive to touch. And again, that makes sense. You can't run away, you can't pull out a gun. You better figure out what's going on. Like, okay, what does this touch mean? What should I do? How should I respond? Okay, so it's really, the more they look, the more fascinating the research is playing out. So, okay, here's another idea. Size limit. So if you think about size limit, when I say that word, right, that's kind of the idea. So the nastic means that you have a touch response in response to some kind of mechanical disturbance. So if you think about the earthquake shaking the plants, that's one way to think about it. So here are some lovely images of plants that do this seismonastic response. And so here on the top is the so-called sensitive plant. The species name is Mimosa pudica. Anyone grow these before? Maybe we should get some seeds and get some growing in the lab. They're really fun. You just can't overtire them. Please be nice to your sensitive plant because, and if you watch the videos that I've posted for these, it's again really amazing how when you touch one of their leaflets, they will immediately respond and back away from that touch. Okay, and then I think Sir David Attenborough has video footage too with the Venus flytrap that's being shown here. So I posted that video. It's like a 3-minute video. So watch these. It's incredibly quick how they can respond. So this is more looking at turgor movements. Okay, turgor movements because they're very quick responses. Growth responses aren't that quick. And so these are turgor shifts that are going on to cause these leaflets to collapse, the Venus flytrap modified leaf to close over the poor hapless insect. And then over here, this is the sundew plant that you can find in bogs around here. If you look really carefully, they're very petite plants and they're well camouflaged. Boggy environment in particular, they kind of blend with the sphagnum moss. But they also can coil over their insects that are trying to latch onto them and eat them. So let's look at the the mimosa, the sensitive plant. So this is in Costa Rica, one of its native habitats, and it's just a field that they took a picture. And if you look carefully, you can start to pick out, especially with the purple pom-pom flower, that's the mimosa. But you can see that there's several Mimosa pudica. The leaves are very delicate. They have little leaflets. Okay, and then there's some more broad leaf plants in the mix. So they took this picture before, and then someone came through and brushed all the leaves here, and you can see now you don't see any of those delicate leaves. They've gotten away. They've disappeared. So let's do that again. There, that's no untouched, touched. Now you just see the broad leaf. And so they think that in the videos these work, so or at least almost all of them that I've checked. So here they're just taking a pencil and they're just touching one leaflet. And you can see the whole leaf, all those leaflets respond. And so what they suspect is the plant is doing this as a strategy to rid itself of insects that are trying to come along and chew on it. And I can't locate the video. I did see a video years ago, and I think it was a Sir David Attenborough video, where they showed a fly landing on the sensitive plant leaves, and then the sensitive plant closed up its leaflets, and then it actually will dip down the whole petiole so that everything dips down. And they showed the fly like tumbling off the plant, and you could swear that fly kind of looked around like, what just happened? Because it was a very effective strategy to get rid of that insect. And so they think that's why they're doing it, or it's a defense strategy. So really, really cool. So I say to be nice because this takes a fair bit of energy. There's a lot to it. It is turgor movement, but there's more to it than that. And so if you do this to your plant, give it some time to recover. It takes about a half hour, I think, for the leaflets to come back. So don't keep doing that all day long if you get one. Venus flytrap, those highly modified leaves. So this is an excellent example of when people say plants out. So in the orange area of the modified leaf, there's little tiny trichomes, pairs, trichomes. And what happens is if an insect is in there crawling around, the insect has to touch 2 of those trichomes within 20 seconds. Then the Venus flytrap will close over. If only 1 of the trichomes gets triggered, the plant gets that signal, and the essentially it's saying, oh, it's probably like a piece of debris or a tiny twig. It just fell in and settled, and it's not crawling around. I don't have to be worried about this. But if you get 2 of those trichomes triggered within 20 seconds, that's something crawling on me. I want to deal with that. And so the trap will actually snap shut and start to digest that poor hapless insect. So there's enzymes that will get used to digest, and then the plant absorbs the insect goo. So you could buy Venus flytrap. I think stores around here often have them for sale, and I've often got the question, do I have to catch flies and feed it to my Venus? And I said, well, only if you really want to. I used to do that with my boys. I was trying to brainwash my boys that plants are cool. So boys, you know, they kind of like that kind of thing. So I'm like, let's go trap some flies. And my cat was really good at trapping flies. So team effort, my cat would get into it. The boys would be, yeah, yes, yes. And then we drop the fly in there and it would do the movement. But the way they sell Venus flytraps, the soil that they have it in has everything the Venus flytrap needs. And so you don't, if you own a Venus flytrap in your home, you don't have to fly. But in its native habitat, bogs are notoriously low. Insect bodies are really high. That exoskeleton has a lot of really good nitrogen. So in their native habitat, yes, they will do this. So you don't have to hunt flies if you don't want to. And here's the beautiful sundew plant that has those sticky trichomes that really, when sunlight hits it, if you've ever seen these up close, they're really quite beautiful in full sunlight because those drops are catching the sunlight. You can easily see why a visual organism would be attracted to this and want to come in and see what those sticky substances are all about. Is that something good to eat? And that's, of course, when the insect gets in trouble because they get caught on those sticky trichomes. And then again, the plant will very quickly curl over that insect. So again, these are turgor movements. There's shifts in water turgor pressure in different parts of the tissue that allow for that very rapid curling, in this case, snapping shut. Okay, so turgor movements are heavily involved in that very rapid response. So those are fun to think about. Here's another one with the big long term, stigmomorphogenesis. Stigmomorphogenesis. Stigmo is touch. Morpho is referring to morphology, so you're looking at the overall growth pattern of that organism. Genesis is to create. Okay, so this is the word trying to say that there's going to be a creation of a body shape in response to touch. And so this is a more of a long-term idea, not the very quick things that we've just been focusing on. So it's usually a slower process that happens over time. It's not something really quick. A change in overall growth pattern due to a mechanical disturbance. So in this image, what they did is they had 2 identical plants to start with, same height, same everything. And then what they did is the left one that is shorter, they touched it frequently. The right one, they never touched it. All right, so what they're doing is creating, in this case, when you keep touching a plant, it senses, it knows you're touching it. And it is a disturbance to them. And so their response is, boy, I'm getting touched a lot. Boy, I'm getting disturbed a lot. I better make sure my stem is nice and strong so that I don't break. I don't want to break because that could be a really bad thing. And so they will slow down their length, but they'll make sure that their stem and their branches are nice and sturdy. If you leave a plant untouched, they don't get that signal And so they're just gonna keep growing and keep looking for sunlight. And so their pattern will be very different. I did this unwittingly when I bought 2 plants from a local store, put one on my porch that was open to air, you know, just normal outdoor air, and then I put one in the bathroom. And so they were identical to start with, and they did the exact same thing. The one on the porch was getting all that wind disturbance, so that they can pick up on that. Their touch sensors pick up on wind, and so that plant stayed really short staff. The one in the bathroom had no wind, no windows in there. I didn't touch it, so that one grew quite big, quite tall. And so you might notice it if you're out hiking around on a well-traveled trail or a deer trail or something like that. Pay attention to that next time. When you see a well-traveled trail, look at the plants right on the trail, edge trail, and then look at the ones, if there's any identical ones further out that aren't getting touched so much, you might see a difference. So thigmomorphogenesis, shift in their overall growth path. Okay. So those turgor movements, again, just to refresh, it is a shift in turgor pressure. And it's usually an asymmetrical shift. You'll have higher turgor pressure in one part of that tissue, lower turgor pressure in a nearby part of the tissue. And so when they've looked at like the sensitive plant with all those little leaflets, what they've noted is that there's special tissue that where they can zoom in on and say, oh, it's this section of tissue where we see really dramatic shifts in turgor. So they call that section the pulvini. That's plural. If you just talk about one tissue, it's pulvinus. But the pulvini are usually found at the base of a leaflet or the base of a leaf. And that location allows for, if that location is going through that asymmetrical turgor shift, that can cause the whole leaflet or the whole leaf to shift its orientation quite readily. And so here it's kind of at each of these little leaflets that there's a pulvinus region. I'll show you a close-up in the next slide. So leaves will do that. Leaflets are just part of leaves. So if I say leaflets, it's leaf tissue. And then I'm going to show you a picture of some flowers that will also be doing that in order to try to deal with being successful at pollination and getting the egg fertilized. So let's look at the sensitive plant. So here you can see at the base of one of the leaflets. So that region that they've kind of given some more detail to, that's the pulvinus region. So it's in this region that you'll get asymmetrical shifts in turgor, and that causes the leaflets to move quite suddenly. And here they're showing, in this case, the lower cells are losing turgor, upper cells are gaining and keeping that turgor, and that will cause the leaflets to certainly move their orientation. This one is just another look at pulvinus. So the pulvinus is just a tissue region that has that shift in turgor. Here's a picture of a flower that we'll certainly get into flower anatomy later, but here, it kind of looks like it's 3-lobed area here. It's that whitish portion. That's the stigma, which is the area of the flower that the pollen has to get to for successful pollination. So you can see that this stigma is in its open orientation. So it's like, all right, I'm ready for pollen. Come at me. And then once it gets pollinated, what happens is it will close up the stigma. So you can see now how the 3 lobes of the stigma have folded up. And so let me show that again. Back here, you can see open. Then once it gets pollinated, closed. So closed for business. I'm done. Okay, let me move on to the next thing I have to do. So this one got pollinated, and now the flower is very, very busy, allowing for that pollination event to happen. And so it's focusing on the next stage that has to happen. So it'll close up like that. Okay, so again, quick movements like that turgor pressure. Think about turgor pressure. Slower movements, growth movements, you usually see much slower time frame. Another turgor movement that can happen on a day-night rhythm is this idea of leaf movement. Nyctinasty, nycta, that front part of the word, nycta, can refer to sleep. So nasty again is movement, so sleep movements. And so some plants, not all, but some plants will do a day-night rhythm where they will orient their leaves in a more vertical position rather than more horizontal. During the day, they like to be more horizontal to the ground. At night, they'll actually shift, and they can either pull their leaves up or they might dip their leaves down. So they're more vertical to the ground rather than horizontal. This one is a prayer plant. These are common house plants. I think I had a mutant prayer plant. I bought a prayer plant to try to show this phenomenon, and it would never pray. So they call it a prayer plant because the leaves will come up and they look like praying hands at night. So does anyone have a prayer plant that works? Must have had a mutant. So anyways, but so what's happening is it is a turgor movement that at night they'll go more vertical. You have to, the plant is sensing a whole bunch of stuff. They're sensing that it's getting dark, and especially if there's a drop in temp. Maybe the plant was too warm. Maybe that was part of the problem, because temperature drops usually have to play a role. And your house is pretty even temperatures through the day, so that might have been part of the problem. When I've gone into the greenhouse here at night to check on the plants and it's dark out, and the first time that happened, I walked in and we had a bunch of kitty bee plants for an experiment that was going on, and I panicked because their leaves were doing that. They're all bending down like that. I thought, oh, they're under drought, they're dying of thirst. Oh no, now we're ruined. And I went a little bit closer and looked, and no, all the pots had adequate soil, everything was great. They were, like, oh, and then it dawned, oh, they're doing that Nyctinasty thing. So it was quite a shock, but luckily it was just Nyctinasty. So sometimes you'll see kitty bees that I found, especially in the greenhouse, because it cools down in there at night, they'll start to bend down. And one of the hypotheses of why they might do that, and I can see that it does make sense. If you think about kidney beans are native to more humid and habitats. And so if you're a plant and it's humid and breathing, you don't want to keep your leaves horizontal where the range of puddles and stays on your leaves, kind of keeping it sopping wet, because that invites fungi to start attacking. And so having a more vertical position at night keeps the water rolling off you. You get a chance to dry out a little bit. You're at less of a risk to getting attacked. So again, when you think about why is a plant moving, whether it be through turgor movements or growth movements, think about where are they native to, what are they responding to, what makes sense in terms of their adaptive strategies. This one's always fun. If you go by few years ago when I was downstate driving by some fields of sunflower. Oh, that was so fun to see how the sunflowers were tracking, all of them in unison, tracking the sun, the sky. And so that is given the term heliotropism. Helio is referring to sun. And so if you've witnessed this, it's really quite fun to watch how, especially if you can just sit in the field for a while, just watch for a couple hours, have a picnic and watch the sunflowers rotate. And so this is the idea of solar tracking. Again, this makes a lot of sense that plants do this, right? Because I just said earlier, plants want to keep their leaves roughly 90 degrees to the sunlight. So that's more north, south, west, east. So the sun would come up in the east. So the plant would want to face its leaves to the sunrise. And then as it tracks over high noon, the horizontal, and so sunflowers do that, and so that phenomenon is called heliotropism. So most plants do this to some degree, especially the herbaceous plants that have that ability to move quite readily. And so here you can do it experimentally. This was, if you read through this as you're studying it's showing how they were demonstrating this tracking mechanism, and that you can have this last image on the right. So what's really cool is that as the southwest step, getting the last drip of sunlight, and then the sun sets dark, most plants will then through the night they'll orient themselves and get ready. So they have trained themselves. They know where the sun's coming next. They'll go and face east. And so that was a really cool experiment trying to document that plants are essentially keeping track of time. They know that they got to start facing east to get ready for the sunrise. So quite amazing. If you've ever been out in really quickly, if you've ever been out in a field of grasses and after a drought, like end of June, July, you might have noticed the grass, the long leaves have curled up along their length. So that's what I'm trying to show on the right image. And I used to see that. I'm like, why are they doing that? That's not good for photosynthesis. And then I realized, oh, it's the end of June. We haven't had rain. This is actually a really good response to drought. They curl up their leaves so that they're trying to minimize water loss. So they're really just trying to tuck themselves tightly, minimize water loss. So keep an eye out for that next summer when you're in a drought-prone stretch of time. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you for paying attention to the bitter end, and we will continue on with this on Tuesday.